In a massive step in India's favor, the Resistance Front, or TRF, has been declared a foreign terrorist organization and a specially designated global terrorist entity by the United States. It is no small move. It's a clarion call, a bold strike against a shadowy proxy of the Lashkar-e-Toiba, backed by Pakistan's ISI, that's been waging a brutal campaign of violence in Kashmir, most notably the horrific Pahalgam attack that claimed innocent lives. The TRF is now on notice. The world sees you for what you are, a terrorist scourge, not a resistance. But here's where the plot thickens. This designation comes at a perplexing time. Just weeks back, Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir was wining and dining with President Donald Trump at the White House, an unprecedented lunch that raised eyebrows across the globe. So the Resistance Front, is this essentially another way of saying Lashkar-e-Toiba? Let's tell you a little bit more about this group. Now, the TRF emerged post-Article 370's abrogation in 2019, posing as a local insurgency, but in fact it was a rebranded Lashkar-e-Toiba. Of that, there appears to be very little doubt. The TRF's formation, many believe, reflects Pakistan's strategy of rebranding terror groups to evade global scrutiny while continuing cross-border terrorism against India. On the 22nd of April, this TRF executed the attack in Pahalgam, targeting civilians in an effort to destabilize Jammu and Kashmir. Remember, 26 people, civilians, lost their lives. Some intelligence sources confirm that the TRF acted under direct orders from Pakistan's military, led by their so-called Field Marshal Asim Munir, to divert attention from domestic issues. Remember, the entire situation with Imran Khan and a lot of other issues, not least of all, the economic state in Pakistan, is a huge headache for him. The TRF operates under the Lashkar-e-Toiba's command, using its logistics, funding and infrastructure based in Pakistan-occupied territories. In fact, many of those were targeted during Operation Sindoor successfully. Now, the US has now designated the TRF as a foreign terrorist organization. This links the Lashkar-e-Toiba and Pakistan's military as well, in a sense. General Munir timed the attack to distract, it is believed, from his political crackdowns and to justify his self-appointment ultimately as Field Marshal. India's Operation Sindoor was a legitimate preventive response to neutralize the terror launchpads of the TRF, exposing Pakistan's continued sponsorship of terror. Joining us now, Milind Deora, Shiv Sena Rajya Sabha MP, and one among the leaders from various political parties who visited the United States after Operation Sindoor. Milind, thank you very much for speaking to us. Good to have you on the program. You've seen what the US has now done by designating the TRF as a terrorist entity. How critical is that? And do you believe that this is directly the result of the efforts a few of you made in visiting the US and speaking to their leaders?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. I cannot claim that our delegation alone should take credit. Certainly, it's the efforts of the Prime Minister, the government of the day, the Foreign Minister, the dialogue, the National Security Advisor, the institutional dialogue, track 1, track 2 dialogue that exists between India and the United States. Having said that, let me be very frank and candid. And during our visit to the United States as part of Operation Sindoor, when our delegation was received by everyone from the Vice President J.D. Vance to the chairmen of the Senate and House Foreign Relations Committees on Capitol Hill, I don't think anyone in our delegation, cutting across political party, had any doubt that America and India have a strategic partnership when it comes to the war on terror and to combating terror globally. In fact, in my personal opinion, this should have happened much earlier from the United States. Because America knows about Pakistan. America has been a victim of Pakistan terror. 9/11 was seeded in Pakistan, conceived in Pakistan. In many ways, handlers had some role to play from Pakistan. Right down the street from Capitol Hill is the Pentagon, which was also attacked, mind you, on 9/11, 2001. So I'm not surprised that America has done this. It's a good thing. It's a welcome step. And I certainly think it's part of our diplomatic efforts and our collective diplomatic efforts to explain not just to the United States, but to countries around the world that India's fight against terrorism emanating from Pakistan is not just a South Asia issue, but it's a global issue.
Is it your worry that America once again appears to be, seeing India and Pakistan through the same prism? I say that because you've had, this important step on the one hand, labeling this terrorist group as a terrorist entity, but on the other hand, you've had the Pakistani general Asim Munir being wined and dined by Donald Trump. You've had American generals say that, look, they need Pakistan in their fight against the ISIS-K. Whereas India says, you need to be consistent about where terrorism comes from. Therefore, how do you look at the larger American policy at this stage?
No, I wouldn't say that America or any country equates India with Pakistan. I think people understand that would be comparing apples with oranges. And Vishnu, quite frankly, the proof is in the pudding. During our delegation's visit to Washington, D.C., the Pakistan delegation was on the east coast of America at the very same time, led by Bilawal Bhutto. The vice president received only our delegation. So every person we met, from people from the State Department to the White House to Capitol Hill, made it absolutely no comparison between India and Pakistan. They see India as a strategic partner. Now, there could be tactical relations between the United States and Pakistan, as you mentioned, to combat ISIS-K, to bring some stability in that region. That's a different issue altogether. The fact that the American State Department and the Secretary of State himself issued a statement designating TRF, the Resistance Front, which everyone knows is a proxy or a front of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, as a globally designated terrorist organization, tells you very clearly that America is fully aware that Pakistan continues to breed, continues to export terrorism. And so we're very confident of that. But having said that, as I said, it's no surprise to me that America would designate them as a terror organization. I think it's a tad bit late, but that's a different issue. I think that the relationship between India and US transcends individuals. It transcends political parties that are in power in the United States or in India. It's an institutional relationship. But having said that, there's far more that needs to be done.
Sure.
If you ask me, not just between India and the US, but between India and the multilateral global community. For instance, the Financial Action Task Force put out a statement recently that they condemned the Pahalgam terror attack. We're all hopeful that in the days, weeks, months to come, FATF will bring Pakistan back onto the grey list, which is absolutely essential to curb terrorism. Secondly, when it comes to institutions like multilateral institutions like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which recently sanctioned a loan of $1 billion to Pakistan. In my opinion and in the government's opinion, these loans must come with important riders. You can't give a loan to a country which is breeding globally designated terrorists without any accountability. So there's a lot more that needs to be done from the international community. I would say there's a lot more that needs to be done from the United States as well. And I'm hopeful that in the weeks and months ahead, that will begin to happen.
All right, Milindira, great speaking to you. Thank you very much for joining us, sharing your thoughts on what is a very important development. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, joining us now, General Atta Hasnain, Ambassador Vivek Kajju, and Professor Latham as well. Thank you all very much for being with us. General Hasnain, let me come to you first. This group, the Resistance Front, it emerged after Article 370 was abrogated in 29. It posed as a local insurgency, but in fact, it's rebranded LET, right? Therefore, with this US measure now specifically targeting this group, how is it significant for India in our fight against terror?
Thank you, Vishnu. Thank you for inviting me for your program. Very briefly, let me just connect up the dots. Lashkar-e-Taiba first banned by the United States way back 2008, if I'm not mistaken. 2014, Jamaat-ud-Dawa, the morphed entity of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, and then subsequently 2019 onwards, the TRF came into being. The TRF was not a morphed entity. It was essentially a proxy of the Lashkar-e-Taiba itself. And so what has been achieved this time is definitely a great achievement diplomatically, to that extent that 2 to 2.5 months after Op Sindoor, at last the recognition has come. And in the statement of the United States, they have contextualized the TRF to the Pahalgam incident. That's a very important aspect. But the question which you just raised what is happening in the sense the United States was on one hand dining and wining Asim Munir and then subsequently declaring the TRF as a terrorist entity. It is all a question of the gray zone nature of this problem and situation. We are going through a gray zone situation in which the United States, to my mind, will play to its interests. And its interests are essentially, no doubt, having India on its side, but definitely keeping Pakistan on its side too.
Ambassador Kaju, two questions. The first one, this is important for India, right? The US labeling this group as a terrorist organization at a time when people have said, where's the evidence for Pahalgam? Of course, we've always said that let's not kid ourselves. We know where terrorism comes from, certainly in this part of the world. But the second question, and what the General was briefly alluding to, where exactly do we stand with America presently?
Look, I carefully noted that, Vishnu, you used the word massive step. I don't see it as a massive step. It's a good step. It's a welcome step. But to me, it's a little too little and a little too late. The Pahalgam attack took place on April 22nd. Operation Sindhur began on the night of May 6th and 7th. We've said very quickly, because this group claimed responsibility, that this group is an offshoot of the Lashkar and that they've undertaken. If it has taken the Americans almost 3 months to accept what we have said, and during that period, as you yourself have said, they wined and dined the now Field Marshal Asim Munir, who is head of the sponsors of terrorism, the instigators of terrorism, then should we call it a massive step and as a great diplomatic success? Yes, it is a recognition of what we've been saying, but I wonder what prevented the United States from coming immediately to accepting what we had said, that it is the resistance front. That is my first point. My second point is that the struggle against terrorism, our struggle, has been going on for 3.5 decades. And if you see the United States record during these 3.5 decades, it's really one of a very calibrated thing. They've tried to keep all balls up in the air. I myself, when I was working, used to be in, remember the days when the United States, before 9/11, didn't even accept that there was Pakistani terror. It is only after 9/11 that things changed. So I think we've got to put these things in perspective and not go overboard.
Okay.
We've said that it's a good step, we welcome it. But my last point, I saw the MEA statement. I do not know why the MEA statement specifically mentions the Secretary of State. It is the American system as a whole that operates in these matters. Why have we pointed specifically to the Secretary of State? After all, there are committees in the United States. This goes through a process. And if the Secretary of State, proved helpful, then it would only embarrass him.
Okay. All right.
So I have a few issues with the way we've done it. And my only point is it's good that it has happened, but let's not get overboard.
All right. I get your point. Professor Latham, how do you actually see this? I think many of us here in India were perhaps overly optimistic about where the relationship with America was going. There was a great deal of idealism attached with the deep technology exchanges which we saw America being willing to get into, the potential of, make in India of, let's say, jet engines, resilient supply chains of semiconductors. All of that may still be on. But at a geostrategic level, it just appears that America is back to playing a card that it has in the past. It's sort of balancing India and Pakistan, seeing us, through the same prism. Is that not deeply problematic?
Yes, sorry, the lights went out here for a second. I'm sure that was a coincidence, not an act of terrorism. First of all, Marco Rubio is the official state spokesman when it comes to foreign matters, so that doesn't surprise me. But the bigger picture is this. The United States has multiple and sometimes incompatible or cross-cutting interests at play here. On the one hand, it has what I would characterize as a residual counterterrorism strategy. That's not where it was on the day after 9/11. That has receded in terms of we've moved from the unipolar moment in the global war on terror to multipolarity and multi-alignment. And that raises a bunch of issues, one of which is the United States really wants a tight strategic relationship with India to counterbalance China in the Indo-Pacific. I think that's pretty clear. Cutting against that, though, and this is the whining and dining piece, Donald Trump in particular, but the blob, the foreign policy establishment, really doesn't want to see a nuclear war on the subcontinent. And if that means rubbing the egos of Pakistan's leadership from time to time, if that's the price that has to be paid, the administration is willing to pay it. We should not forget that prior to 9/11, and especially during the Cold War, Pakistan was India's strategic partner, and India was in the sort of in the Soviet penumbra. Not
Sorry,
quite in the
Pakistan was whose strategic partner? Was America's
was America's strategic partner.
Right. Go ahead, yes.
That flipped at a certain point when China rose and Pakistan went off in a different direction, especially around terrorism. The United States kind of switched gears, but there's still a pro-Pakistan group in the United States that sees that as an important partnership. The other couple of things that I think are worth pointing out here is that the U.S. really would like that strategic relationship with India. I think it would really like a positive trade relationship with India as well, and I remain confident that we are continuing to move in that direction. It benefits, at the end of the day, not everybody, but most of the important constituencies in both countries. So geopolitical alliance or alignment, not a formal treaty. A more or less free trade agreement, I think, a bilateral free trade agreement. And that's counterbalanced by, reinforced by the counterterrorism piece. But the U.S. is willing to do whatever it takes to prevent escalation to a nuclear war on the subcontinent, hence the whining and dining.
Ambassador Kaju, briefly before I go back to General Hasnain. Yeah.
I think I would like to, I agree with most of what the professor has said, but I would like to remind him that between two nuclear states, the first step on the escalation ladder is a terrorist attack. He has mentioned the Cold War. Does he recall one instance during the Cold War when either of the main protagonists, the United States or the Soviet Union, carried out a terrorist attack on each other's territory? They played games, terrible games, all over the world. What prevents the United States from saying straight away that Pahalgam was an escalatory move? It was an escalatory move up the nuclear ladder, and that it is not acceptable for a nuclear state to carry out such an attack on a neighboring nuclear state. It has never done so.
Yeah.
Am I wrong, Professor, when I say that the first step is a terrorist attack on another nuclear state?
No, history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. So this set of circumstances is different than the Cold War. The U.S. and the Soviets went to great lengths not to put 18-year-old soldiers shooting at each other because they knew that would escalate. But they did fight wars via proxies in Vietnam and Korea, et cetera, right? So this is not quite the same as that, but you're absolutely right. It is an unprecedented, with nuclear powers that are not a planet apart, but are right next door to each other. It's a 30-plus-year-old problem, right? The status of Jammu and Kashmir and the politics, you guys in your audience knows that at least as well as I do. So it is unprecedented, and it's scary, and I think that's what caused the U.S. to not respond as quickly as I might have if I were president of the United States.
All right. General Hasnain, just to get back on the resistance front, the TRF, what do we know about this group?
See, Vishnu, first of all, to put your question into perspective, the TRF continues to remain as it is in the valley, in Kashmir, and all over Jammu and Kashmir. It's a proxy force of the Lashkar-e-Toiba. Essentially, the Lashkar wanted to keep his hands off, confuse the whole issue as to who was responsible for what kind of acts. The TRF, for example, took ownership of the Pahalgam Act and then subsequently denied it also. But to that extent, I would say a lot of people are imagining that this kind of a measure, which has just been undertaken by the United States, is going to put an end to the TRF. No, I'm sorry to say that that's not going to happen. Tactically on the ground, I don't think there'll be any effect on the TRF on the way it functions, etc. Its control from the other side of the line of control will continue to remain the same, and it will continue to act. Small actions, big actions, all that will continue for at least for a fair period of time, unless the Pakistani deep state takes deliberate actions to put an end to this. And that I will take up the professor on this particular issue, that if you don't want a nuclear war on the subcontinent, I think the United States should be more proactive in making sure that it puts some controls over the deep state of the state of Pakistan to make sure that these acts don't happen. It's because the United States desists from doing it that these acts continue to happen, and the risk of a potential nuclear war is always higher.
All right, gentlemen, lots to think about over there, but it is an important step by the United States today, one that couldn't have come a day later. Thank you all very much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.